Hello, my name is Nikki Edmondson, and I decided to do my paper on equipment for living for women in the military, and I used the film G.I. Jane to relate to my research paper. I started off the introduction with some basic film background. The film was created in 1997 and was directed by Ridley Scott. Lieutenant Jordan O'Neill was chosen for a test case in the United States Navy SEALs program. She is the only female, and she has a difficult time, and she goes into the program knowing this, that it's only a 60% pass rate, even for the males. What Lieutenant O'Neill doesn't know while she is going through the training process is that she is being sold out by a senator of Texas who is being blackmailed by the Defense Department with politically fatal base closings unless O'Neill fails the program. The film shows scenes such as the CRT selection training and other various training scenes that capture the essence of Lieutenant O'Neill's failing and then getting back up again to successfully completing the training in the end. So that's a little bit of film background for you as we continue on through the paper. My thesis that I came up with was that I plan to show that the film G.I. Jane serves as equipment for living because it shows that women can match men in strength and endurance. Moving along to the literature review, I began by looking into article written by Burke. Kind of showed that the tools for living in relation to communication stories, and then I kept going to article written by Young, which stated similarly to the above but more in relation to film. Young also calls attention to the ability to make connections between the plot of films and how they view their everyday lives. And then I looked a little more into Keisner and Seipert. Keisner looks more at who the men and women, as they're watching films, who they relate to in regards to the film, and Seipert looks more into the symbolic interaction of how people react to a film and how it relates to more of their life. Throughout the literature review, I stated that the text in G.I. Jane provides an equipment for living for viewers and military personnel who have experienced a means of undermining from being female. However, none of the literature includes a measure of how women are as physically and mentally fit to take on the same job titles in the military as men. Also, the literature as a whole suggests that G.I. Jane is a means for living in regard to women in the military. In my methodology, I stated that with women still not allowed to be in the United States Navy SEALs program, my paper is going to aim to bridge the gap as to why women are still not allowed to be in the Navy SEALs program today. I chose 4 scenes throughout the film that showed Jordan struggling to make it through the training as well as excelling in the training, and I also picked 2 sort of generic scenes so that the audience could kind of get a visual of how really difficult the SEALs training is. I chose a boot camp scene, and I also chose what we call the ringing of the bell scene, which I'll get into a little more later. Methodology continuing, I chose to look more into the rhetorical tradition, more specifically the organizational control theory. And it states 5 controls, and so I looked a little into each of the controls, but I went ahead and stated in the methodology what each one of them means. So, real quickly, the simple control is the use of open direct power. Technical control is the use of devices and technologies. The bureaucratic control is the use of organizational procedures and formal rules. Cultural control rests on the values and common practices of the organizational control itself. And finally, concerted control is the use of interpersonal relationships and teamwork. and I got all 5 of these from the rhetorical tradition from Littlejohn and False, Theories of Human Communication. The data section, I sort of listed out the 4 scenes that I have listed here. The first scene is called Pain Tells You That You're Still Alive, which is a scene where a commanding officer states a sort of famous quote. He says, what is the best thing about pain? It tells you that you're still alive, so that's kind of where the title of that scene comes from. The second one is where Jordan is getting physically beaten by one of her commanding officers, and there's a pretty significant part, but I'll get to that in my analysis from that scene. The third one is the ringing of the bell scene, which states that in order to say that you're quitting the training, you ring a bell that is on base 3 times in a row, and that tells everyone that you've quit. And finally, the fourth scene is one of the later scenes, and it shows that Jordan has kind of excelled, and she's now seen as an equal to her fellow trainees, all of the men, because they nominate her to be the next class officer. In my analysis section, I looked a little deeper into each of the 5 controls. So starting off, simple control, in scene 1, the commanding officer presents a lot of direct power towards Jordan, especially with his stance being upright and and the way he looks everyone in the eye shows that he has power over all of the trainees. Second control, technical control, is seen a lot in scene 3 because the textbook states that an example of we have cell phones as means of communications for all 24 hours of the day. I felt like the bell on base as a means for an out. It is there 24 hours of the day as well. So I found a sort of a connection there. And the commanding officer in this scene, I felt like it was important to point out that he was wearing a clean, all-white uniform, looking directly at all the SEALs who are covered in blood and sweat. Also, the bureaucratic control, the ringing of the bell scene, and scene 4, where, of course, Jordan is getting nominated to be class officer, is shown here because Jordan responds to her officer with yes sir, even in the most casual conversation of the film. And as a whole, the military is full of rules and regulations, and these are also evident throughout the whole film. Jordan's facial expressions in scene 4 are important. I wanted to point those out. She's very serious looking and keeps eye contact with her officer, but for the first time she has a pleasant look about her. So we can kind of see a little bit of a change happening here. The fourth control, cultural control, I felt like was shown in scene 1 a lot because it shows how the whole culture of the training was, because it even starts out with saying wallowing in the mud, and it just gets very graphic as to how tough these men and women have it in the entire training. Finally, concerted control, I felt like was shown in scenes 2 and 4. In scene 2, the men start to realize that Jordan is being treated wrong, and one of them even stands up for her, which in the end ends up not being good for him. And in scene 4, the men begin to see her as an equal, as I mentioned before, and they nominate her for class officer. And finally, my conclusion. The film serves as a positive for young women in the military because it shows that women are able to do everything that a man can do, even in the toughest training of the military. That is shown through Jordan successfully completing the program. There's been many articles written about the connection between human lives and film, which I stated in my literature review. And if women in the military can use this film as an inspiration, then women could be accepted into the SEALs program in the future, because I believe I stated earlier that they still are not. However, they are beginning to have more job opportunities open up for them in other aspects of the military. And also, if in the future women are allowed in the SEALs program of the Navy, more research should be done on the details of how women in the military use film as an equipment for a living when considering to join the military. And here is my work cited, and thank you for your time.